We'd like to introduce our next panel, starting 5 minutes ago. We'll go a little farther, but I'd like to introduce the moderator, David Yang. He's the Vice President of ICF International, and he will introduce the panelists. Thank you all.
Thank you, Peggy. Can everyone hear me? Well, good afternoon, everybody. I'm honored to be able to moderate this panel on digital transformation. What is digital transformation? Simply put, it's when organizations turn to technology to improve their business processes and find ways to better serve their customers, or in this case of our panels, their citizens. Today, we're fortunate to have some of the government's true modernization leaders both with us here in person and on Zoom, and I'd like for them to introduce themselves this time, starting with Sonny. Sonny can be on the screen. Sonny, are you there? If you could just share with us really quickly what you do at GSA, maybe a little bit about your background and your career path in government, that'd be great.
Thanks, Dave. It's great to talk to you, and it's a pleasure to be here. Thanks for inviting me to join the panel today. I'm Sonny Hashmi. I'm the Commissioner for the Federal Acquisition Service. The Federal Acquisition Service is part of GSA. We're responsible for managing the supply chain of over $75 billion worth of products and services that the government needs to achieve its mission. And we are the primary and largest collaborator and marketplace for the industry to engage in opportunities with the federal government. I've been in this role for about 9 months now. I just joined with the new administration. Previously, I've served as the CIO for GSA for a number of years and have spent many years in the private sector as well. And I look forward to this conversation. Thank you.
Thank you, Sonny. And Bill, I see that you've come on. Why don't you introduce yourself real quick? Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Hey, David. Nice to see you, and hello, everybody, and thanks for having me. Really an honor to be invited. My name is Bill Pratt. I'm the Director of Strategic Technology Management at the Department of Homeland Security. I work directly for the CTO, who works directly for the CIO. So we work very closely with all of our Office of Chief Information Officer partners as we push forward modernization efforts across DHS. Very specifically, what my team does is writes the governance and the guidance for acquiring IT at DHS with partner directorates like PARM and S&T. And then we measure against that governance by virtue of our program health assessment team. We are the folks that feed the federal IT dashboard on behalf of DHS. When you see the CIO there, we generate those ratings with some other partners. And then we figure out how we can help the programs who may start to trend off plan. We want to make sure that we're not simply writing a bad report card, but we are actually trying to assist them in meeting the mission for the federal government and of course, for the taxpayers. And then finally, we do IT modernization from a governance perspective, very specifically in my organization, to make sure we can streamline all the policies and procedures that dictate governance, IT governance, to make sure that we're doing the right thing. And then it feeds right back into our little circle of life, and then we measure against that governance once again. We partner with several great other divisions, enterprise architecture, technical assessments, to provide a complete picture. And of course, we always look 5 to 10 years down the road in CTO to figure out what's coming next. And of course, we partner all across OCIO with several exciting new features that we're trying to push out. And we'd love to talk about those a little bit more today. I'm an old ICE guy. I was formerly, actually I'm older than INS. I'm older than DHS, I should say. I started at INS right after 9/11, and I was proud to do so and been there ever since. Of course, DHS was stood up. I was at ICE for a number of years, then came to headquarters. So, and I was on the industry side before that, so I got a pretty good view of both sides. But I really, really believe in industry and government partnerships, and looking forward to talking a little bit more about that.
Thank you, Bill.
Thanks for having me. Looking forward to the conversation.
Great, thanks you. And here with me today on the stage is Ed Devgello from the Department of Transportation. Ed?
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Edward Devgello. I work for the Department of Transportation as a senior technical advisor, and then in particular for the sub-agency known as the Federal Transit Agency as the chief enterprise architect. In my role, I advise a lot on what types of technologies we should be using to enable our business to have better automation and a better digital experience. When thinking about the Department of Transportation, it was established in the 1960s by Lyndon B. Johnson. Originally, it was about highways and connecting all the states together in a way so that you could ship goods around. And then it grew to other areas such as ferries and airplanes and stuff like that. Basically, all types of transportation are regulated through the Department of Transportation. Within my area in particular, Federal Transit Administration, we focus on public transportation. So that's like your WMATA or your MTA. And it's about providing capital investments throughout the country to enable public transportation, and also advising on safety to make those forms of transportation as safe as possible. And so, with those things as our mission, my office is responsible for figuring out the best technologies to use to disperse capital investments, which are grants, and take the data that we get to figure out ways to do safety benchmarking and figure out how we can make that transportation safer. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Ed. So I'd like to start off, I'm going to ask each one of you, where do you think we are today when it comes to digital transformation? You can make it specific to your job and your agency or the broader government. And I'd like to start with you, Sonny.
Yeah, thanks, David. So one of the things that's been very obvious to everybody in the audience, I'm sure we've had this conversation in many different forums, is that the pandemic over the last year and a half has completely changed both the velocity and the scope of what we traditionally thought of as digital transformation. Especially in government, for too long, we've thought of digital channels and digital experience as a nice to have in addition to or on top of how government traditionally did business. And as you all know, government historically have been designed around paper-based processes, forms filling out. You have to go to a building to submit your case. People have to review that case. That completely turned on its head when the pandemic happened, both in terms of necessity to think of a new way to engage with citizens, but also then to deliver product, services, and guidance and grants and so forth in a much more faster and real-time way, but also doing it all digitally. Because not only do the citizens expect that in their daily life, but also it became impossible for us to execute our mission in a traditional way where you have large office buildings and personnel who are processing these whether it's acquisitions or projects and so forth. And so I think for us, what it means is that I think the chess pieces have moved. It's a completely different game now, and where digital becomes the primary channel for delivery of mission where possible, and everything else comes after it. So when you start thinking about the world in that sense, it becomes even more imperative for us to rethink and put a new focus on the experiences that we're creating, to rethink our processes in a digital-first manner, to rethink how our customers, our citizens, our stakeholders expect to engage with us and expect to get those services, products, and so forth, and to build our new generation of systems, processes, and so forth around that understanding. And so for us, what that means is in our organization, we manage anywhere around 1 million contractual transactions a year. And if any of you have engaged with the federal government before on getting access to contract vehicles or responding to RFPs and so forth, it's a very cumbersome process. A lot of this historically is required in-person business development, a lot of paperwork going back and forth, meeting contracting officers to get clarification and so forth. And so we've had to pivot very hard. And what we realize is that by rethinking how we engage the industry to respond to government needs in a digital-first way, not only can we reduce the cycle time, we can increase efficiency in the process, but we can also attract a wider audience from across the country of companies who historically haven't had the same access to show up to a vendor day or show up to an exit conference in person in Washington, D.C. or headquarters location. So we are very excited about that. And to us, the digital transformation means we have to rethink our back-end systems and processes so that we can speed and move at the speed of industry. We can attract the best, latest technologies and providers, especially focusing on small businesses. And we create a marketplace that is thriving, is constantly updated, and ultimately connect those capabilities to solve mission problems for our agency partners. And doing it in a way that provides equal opportunity for everybody across the country, not just those who are located in particular areas in the country. And so it's a pretty big, daunting challenge. As many of the agencies would recognize, we have 20, 30 years of legacy to unpack and repack. That legacy is built in processes and systems and policy that needs to be looked at. So over the next 2 or 3 years, we're going to be doing a lot of work to reimagine our systems that ultimately will drive better digital experiences, streamline our back-end processes and through automation and advanced technologies so that we can take some of the busy work off the plate for our contracting officers and other team members and help them focus on high yield, complex tasks. And ultimately, hopefully, if we do this right, we can not only reduce the cycle time and friction inherent in the process, but also increase opportunities for everybody in the country to participate in the federal marketplace.
Yeah, thank you, Sonny. Bill, DHS, dynamic things are happening over there. You guys are constantly facing new challenges. How are you using technology to help meet those challenges?
All right, well, thanks, David. And I have to jump right, piggyback on Sonny for exactly what we're doing and from a user experience perspective and customer experience perspective, just to tackle that off the top. You know, it's so many frustrations to get the job done, both as customers try to fill out these multiple forms, try to convert from old paper-based forms to the online versions, for instance, our USCIS component doing that among many others. But then even internally, right, as we try to provide the best tool, the best value to our customers, we have a lot of frustrations internally. The processes we follow ourselves are very onerous sometimes. And so we're tackling those as well. I have a team member of mine and we're gonna just tackle the frustration list this year. She's an AI expert. We're lucky to get her, just brought her aboard. And we're gonna look at RPA and AI to try to streamline as many internal processes that stop us from providing the fastest possible service to our customers. Very specifically on the other things that we do internally in terms of IT acquisition, we're going to try to make huge changes there. One of the biggest things we're rolling out this year is something called the Streamline software acquisition process. And we actually reimagined it from idea to deployment, the entire front end of the process, and targeted towards Agile and SecDevOps based delivery. Now, many people say DevSecOps. The DHS decision is SecDevOps because security is built in from the beginning. And of course, we support that, but both of those processes are nearly identical in doing that. But the interesting thing was in the past, and we did an analysis over the last, it's taken us about 3-4 years to do the analysis, do the pilots, and then distill down the action plans we developed and actually have nailed them. We've got them all done. And what we found out was, you know, people just were starting to build things. When I say people, I'm talking about major IT programs where we're up to billions of dollars of the taxpayers' money. They're starting to say, here's what we want to build. And we didn't really know where we were at the time. We didn't know our true starting place. So we built a lot of rigor back into the process in order to be more agile on the back end. And what would happen was the way the funding streams were working, the way everything worked, is you would spend a year, perhaps 2, doing this upfront planning. And by the time you got your money, by the time you proved that you were ready to spend the money and ready to make the investment, then really you were so far into the process that the easiest thing was to bring in a big integrator who came in and looked at everything you did and half the time tossed out what you'd done already and says, here's how we do business. And it was another 18 months before any value was seen by the taxpayer. And so by building much more rigor and a much more structured roadmap in the front piece of the acquisition lifecycle, by the time we're ready to get all of our money, and by the way, we're giving them money earlier. The programs get an earlier allotment of money to help them get through this process, perhaps to do some prototyping. By the time we're ready to start building, and we know exactly what we want to build, or we have a pretty good idea of what we want to build, now they can, in an agile manner, start churning out functionality in 6-month increments or less. 6 months being the FITARA mandated and OMB mandated minimum or maximum, I should say, for getting usable functionality to the field. Formerly, we weren't really set up to do that. Now we're ready to start rocking and rolling. The really great thing about the small business community here is we are now looking to small boutique experienced folks in certain aspects, certain disciplines of IT that can come in and help these program management offices plan these roadmaps going forward. And so cyber experts, of course, cyber is used huge. But all these other types of expertise, right down to UX, I mean, architecture, whatever it takes to get a program ready to do the upfront analysis and analytics that they need to do to know how to go forward and build a good roadmap, and then start putting usable production, usable functionality right into the field as soon as they bring their developers on. And so it's a little bit more work up front, but it's actually the government taking on a lot more of that analysis with industry partners. And then we don't have to turn it over to somebody who kind of manages the entire thing for us, and then it goes on from there. So a lot of very interesting new contract vehicles that are in place as well, but lots of opportunities for small businesses to come in and help, and really excited to get the fresh ideas into the federal government, into DHS certainly.
Thank you, Bill. Ed, your agency and the infrastructure bill are closely related. I know that you've always been an early adopter at leading edge technologies and how it better serves what your agency. Could you tell us a little bit about what you're doing around things like RPA and AI, and maybe for the crowd explain what some of those things do and how you're using it in your job?
Yeah, certainly. So I run the artificial intelligence program for the Federal Transit Administration. With that, you know, it's not as fancy as like it is with TV and things like that. For us, it's just getting a bunch of math nerds with some data to be able to make predictions and automate data decision making. You know, so those are the big things for us. So, you know, some simple use cases where it's not even really AI, but it's using AI techniques is like our grant apportionments. So the ways that we calculate the amount of money we distribute, rather than do it through spreadsheets and have all these different data sources and try and figure out how you calculated what. We're just using data science techniques to centralize the way we do grant calculations, so that we have more agility to deal with it faster. You know, when we talk about other things like RPA, you know, at the department right now, we're going through something that we're calling a botathon. So like anybody who's a contractor at DOT or federal employees, we're just trying to drive adoption by letting as many people participate in this contest to see who can build the best robotic process automation example. And you know, with I think we have like right now, like when I last looked, we have like around like 190, 200 people participating in it. But the thing with RPA is, for me, like, sorry about that. You talk about like this idea of a bot and this bot, like, you know, replacing humans with decision making or things like that. But really what it is it's something that exists in the digital world that can do an automated task. And so in order for it to exist in the digital world, there needs to be some sort of system or place where that digital exists. And then it can access that, it can transform that information, it can share it with another system. So it's really moving information between digital places or transforming it. Those are the end outcomes we look at with RPA types of solutions. It helps a lot with AI-based things, because a lot of times what you're doing in the artificial intelligence world is you're cleaning data. That's really what you probably spend 80% of your time doing. I collect a lot of data, like, you know, I might like use Waze data and stuff like that, but it's not gonna be perfect data. I'm gonna have to figure out ways to fix some of it to make it like more usable for the algorithms or predictions that I'm trying to build. You know, things like that. You know, pivoting a little bit, I mean, I can speak to my agency, like what's unique about us, I feel like, is that we finished our modernization journey. So all of our major systems are in place and are on a modern platform. For us, it's been about like little systems and figuring out like whether they go with our existing technologies, do we need to purchase new things? You know, but before COVID, we were very digital first. And you know, we were very much about automation. During COVID, we've been able to enjoy the scalability of the investments we made in technology. But you know, like when you look at the previous panel, I think like one of the interesting things, or the big challenges the whole federal government is gonna face, is that, you know, you existed one way. And so like, you know, like when we look at like the workplaces, the majority of people were in the building, and then like occasionally some people would be remote. And then during COVID, we had like this full shift, right? So now we lived in a world where only some of the people were in the office, but the majority were remote. And then so when we come out of this, it's gonna be another phase where it's probably gonna be a mix. So You know, when I went to the office before COVID, I could assume that the majority of my coworkers were there. When I'm in the office right now during COVID, I can assume the majority of my coworkers aren't there. And then like in this new world, there's gonna be a mix. And so, you know, the solutions I get, like Teams and things like that, you know, that helps augment some of these things, but that doesn't help exactly with the new problem. And so that's where like agility needs to come in with our solutions of, you know, how do I know who's physically in the office and who's not, so that when I have a meeting, I know like whether or not I want to meet in person or I do it virtually, and you know, the levels of those things. So that's where when you put together these solutions too, it's no longer just being able to be digital first or automated. You need things that are also flexible and can adapt to the unpredictableness of what that environment's going to be. Because everybody out there right now is throwing out guesses of what they think. They think, oh, everybody is going to come back to the office. And then you talk to somebody else and they think the total opposite. Oh, nobody's going to be at the office, and now I need a workplace that is more able to be agile. And you know, maybe it's like GSA's model where not everybody is has their own space. You know, things like that. So I think for us, a lot of our solutions right now we're thinking about is this idea of agility with it for the unpredictableness.
Thanks, that's great insights. The last panel talked a lot about workforce, finding talent, and obviously all of these solutions require talented people. I'm just wondering how's your agency meeting the demand for technical resources, and how can industry help? And Sonny, I'll start with you there. You wanted to address the workforce issue?
Yeah, absolutely. So a couple of things I want to mention there. So first of all, what's interesting in this pandemic, and especially coming out of it, is that if you look at GSA and our mission, we are right in the thick of defining that future state. So we manage the entire federal real property portfolio. We are right now in the middle of doing deep analysis and research exactly on the topic that Ed mentioned, is what is the future model going to be? And there's some really interesting research that's emerging out of this. We're doing a lot of conversations with our employees, with our supervisors, with our agency partners. And there's some interesting things happening there that I'd love to kind of talk about maybe in a separate forum. But the future is definitely going to be hybrid. The future workplace is going to be very different than the traditional workplace. It's going to be based on that concept of flexibility that Ed was talking about. And there's going to be a place for real estate and physical location in the future, even if people have the opportunity to work remotely. In my case, for example, in my shop, our data has shown that about 80+% of our people will never need to come into the office if they don't choose to do so, because our work can be done remotely. However, that means that some people are required to come in by the nature of their job. They have access to SCIFs. They need to have classified meetings. They have to meet with customers. But it doesn't mean that 80% of people will never come in. There's going to be situations where, due to collaboration, to do brainstorming, to do certain things, there's going to be a need to create a physical space where people can come together and see each other, work with each other in a different mode. So that's one topic. But to your point of workforce, a couple of things are becoming very, very clear. And this is not something that has just happened out of the pandemic. If you look back 5 to 10 years, the whole nature of technologists and the need and the industries that rely on these technologists, their skill sets, is completely changing. Used to be about 10, 15 years ago that if you were a technologist, you ended up working for a large company in the services space or product space, a Google, a Microsoft, or you work for an organization to run their technology, to operate and build systems and so forth. And that is completely different now. Now you're competing for the same technologists that you traditionally had to poach from or hire from a technology company. You're competing for their attention, but they're also getting offers from Tesla, from GM, from Ford, from GE, from somebody who's building construction equipment. Every industry, it's the technology industry now. Every single product is connected to the internet. Every single company has an e-commerce presence, and it's core to their business to be technology companies first. So it's not just about competing within a particular market. Now you're competing for that talent across all markets, from media and entertainment to healthcare to manufacturing to industrial goods. Everybody needs technologists all of a sudden. So we have a challenge. All of us have a challenge, whether you're in the private sector or you're in government, to attract, retain, and find the best talent. Our strategy for this is, and it's not just in technology, we have similar challenges in the 1102 Corps, which is the Contracting Officer Corps. It's a highly specialized, very highly skilled profession, and there's very few of them around. And like every agency needs that expertise, because without that expertise, The pressure on that core is increasing. Now, not only is it just a matter of signing a contract, now you have to do acquisition with sustainability in mind, with small business in mind, with DEIA principles in mind. Now you have to think about cybersecurity in a brand new way, and all of that expectation is being pushed down to the acquisition core as well. So our philosophy is simple. We need to build that talent pipeline. It's our job as government leaders to build that talent pipeline. We have to bring in early and mid-career people who may want a change in scenery, who want to be closer to the mission, and we have to train them, we have to give them opportunity. We also have to create a culture and environment with flexibility in mind. We know that not all the talent is going to be available in the DC area. We just heard from the previous panel, there's 60,000 technology jobs that are open today in the DC area. So if I had to find an amazing technologist moving forward, my bet is going to be to find someone who's probably not looking in the DC area or residing in the DC area. And in order for me to get their best talent into my business, into our operation, into our mission, I have to create a culture where they can connect from anywhere, they can add value from anywhere. That is the imperative. Does that mean that there's going to be rethinking that is required in communities, in real estate and so forth? Absolutely. But we have also left many parts of this country behind where amazing talent resides that we now have an opportunity to tap into. So now, not only do we have to build the talent pipeline of the future, we have to create a culture where they can be productive and do their best work from anywhere. And so it's more about just, I want to work from home, and therefore, this personal flexibility, I don't want to commute. It's about tapping into talent where it exists. And as we move forward, I have personal friends who've moved out of San Francisco and New York over the pandemic because, rents are expensive. They're for personal, they want to start a family, they want to buy a different type of a house. Those preferences will drive, people's migration across the country. And we, as organizations, companies, governments, have to meet these people where they are. The power is shifting into the hands of the workers, away from the corporate or governmental hands, and we need to meet these workers and their talents where they are. So that's our strategy. We've recently released. Some of you may have noticed or heard, we recently launched the U.S. Digital Core. That's an attempt to bring recent college graduates into public service and create career paths for them so that they can grow and thrive and bring their best talents to work. We also have other programs like the Presidential Innovation Fellows and so forth to attract talent from the private sector and others to do cohort-based temporary tours of duty into government. We have mission to spare. We have so many important things to do, so we believe we have something to offer, even if we can't match private sector salaries sometimes. But between all of that, we also have to create that flexibility so that we can meet the talent where it is, rather than having to force that talent to come into our buildings.
All right, thanks, Sonny. I know we're coming up on time. I want to leave some room for questions, but Ed, if there's a small business startup in this room and they want to get engaged with you or anybody else on the stage, what do you recommend? How do they get started talking to someone like yourself?
Well, I think there's two important things. One, have an understanding of our mission or where you think your solution can fit into it. And then the other important thing that's going to come up is, even if you have an idea that aligns with me, how can I acquire it? For me personally, with where I focus in software development, we have something called the SWES vehicle, and that's where we do the majority of our purchases out of it. So you can look that up and see who is on the SWES vehicle, but if you bring me a solution, that's probably where I'm going to need to do it if it's new software development or things like that. And there's some ways potentially around it, but in general, that's where we try and hone everything. It comes down to special cases. But when you look at any federal agency, I think that's important, is to understand how your solution can enable the mission, and then what is your path to being able to sell that to that agency. Yeah.
Bill, I know you're always putting out white papers. A quick word on how industry can engage with you.
Yeah, so great. Both guys, Sonny and Ed, both nailed it, absolutely. So really excited to take advantage of a lot of the opportunities Sonny talked about coming out of GSA. Ed is 100% right. Obviously, don't call me asking me to sell me something because based on what you've got. I've got a need. All of the government agencies have needs. The taxpayers have needs we need to meet for them. If you have a solution to all those needs, that's going to get you so much further ahead. And oh, by the way, how do I buy it, right? As so many folks have come to me over the years and want to just have a conversation, and there's no way for me to get to them through any sort of vehicle. So those are kind of some of the things, if you do your homework in advance, you're going to be rocking. From our perspective, I'm really happy and proud to announce we got a new cyber talent management system, CTMS, that's going to allow us to hire cyber pros at DHS using different pay bands, and where we're actually trying to nail down the salary right to the level of experience and education. That's brand new. It's very exciting. I'm looking forward to that. And the other thing is I want to jump on something Sonny said. Hey guys, we have the mission, right? We're competing for cyber talent and all these other talents, but we have a great mission. And one thing I will tell young folks, even mid-career folks, is, hey, you know what? Guys like me, you know, I'm pushing 65, I'm not quite there, but we're out of here in a couple of years. If you've taken a look at who's in the federal government, especially in the IT space, so many just older folks, we're not gonna be around forever. I mean, my sell to the younger generation now is come, soak about 5-10 years of experience out of us, and then we're out of here, and you can make this your own thing. You can run this place in just a couple of years, and that's the entire federal government, because we really just the way the percentages are working work that way. So join up, guys. You can make it happen.
Thanks, Bill. I think we got 5 minutes left for questions. Do we have any questions on the text or from the room? Yes, we have questions. No questions. Does anybody in the room have any questions? No
and
one.
David, while you're asking questions, one plug I wanted to mention that Bill mentioned was, and Ed mentioned, if you have questions around, hey, I have a product, I have a capability, I've talked to somebody, they're interested in engaging with us, they have a problem we can solve, we just don't know which vehicle to use, we just don't know how to sell, reach out to us. That's my job, that's our job. We just want to make sure that we find easy, achievable, simple, fast access paths for you and your company to then connect with the DHS, with DOT. We have a lot more work to do in that space. Some of the work that we do tends to be very complex for you, the private sector. I am working very hard to reduce that burden, but we do have strategies and ways for you to get access to those channels in a very quick way. So this is literally our job. Reach out to us if you have any of those questions around which vehicle do I get onto, and how do I sell to DOT if they use this particular vehicle? Well, I'm not on that vehicle. We will make sure that you working with our partners, partner agencies, find the right solution for you all.
Great, thanks. And it looks like we have just stand up there, tell us who you are and your question, please.
Hi, my name is Prashant with Cloud Leap Technologies. Just a quick question for Ed. I know you said that you guys are working on AI ML and that data gathering and data transformations, some of the biggest work. What are some of the challenges? I've worked at many different federal agencies for the past 30 years, and a lot of data is kind of siloed in applications. What are some of the challenges, and how do you address those? Especially, before you're doing AI ML.
When you look at the Department of Transportation as a whole, we have a lot of AI programs going on too. I just want to mention, it's not just FTA. So I manage the FTA ones. Dan Morgan, of course, our Chief Data Officer for the Department of Transportation, is more privy to looking across the portfolio and understanding what all the different modes are doing. When you look at us, when we meet as a group, some of the things we focus on is data governance. That's something at FTA we really did as our basis before we went into the AI world. The person who became the Chief Data Officer of the state of Virginia, Carlos Rivero, he was the one who worked closely with me to define standards for how all of our applications would be built so that it was universal across the agency. And where that's important is that if you're going to collect data, you might as well figure out the right way to name it, identify it, so that it can become useful later. So that was the thing where we saved a lot of time for our report writers and things like that, and we're doing business intelligence, was we had centralized catalogs of what our data was with definitions of it and things like that. So I think that's an important building block, is that. And then, from there, it's about driving adoption of it. How do you get more people interested in making more data-driven decisions? how do you build awareness in your organization around the data you have and things that people can use? So we have a community of practice just around our data, and since we have a lot of engineers in our office, they can take data sources and build their own reports in Tableau and things like that. And then, the other thing is when you look at like starting to work in the artificial intelligence realm, the most important thing is to look at your data and think about what you know best. Because if you're going to use artificial intelligence, which is automated data analysis, somebody needs to be able to say whether or not what these algorithms is doing is correct or not. Does this make sense? Is this true? And then, once you build some capability around that, you can start expanding into other data areas, either areas that you own, or, like in our case, some of the things we're doing is we're like looking at like what happens if we start splicing census data with what we have. Some other things we talk about is like, what if we take national gas prices and start integrating them with what we have to see like if we can predict like what maintenance costs of different transit areas are going to be for like the buses they use and things like that. Because if gas is just rising in a bunch of places, then I don't need to know that like maintenance is going to go up. I should be able to just predict it and things like that. And so that's the way our AI journey has worked. Is it's been like lockstep moving up. And the whole thing that's most important is just making everything more data capable for the whole organization.
Thank you, Ed. And I think that's time for us. I want to give a shout out to my panelists here. Everyone, really honored to have you guys here. Appreciate your insights. I'll make sure the ways to reach you, Sonny, Bill, and Ed, on any folks here. And again, thank you for your time and thank you for coming on the panel.
Thank you.
Thank you, David.